Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are now at episode 8 of Natural Wong. To celebrate this, I've decided to tell you guys just a little bit more about myself. Perhaps you're wondering why I use a green cobra as my display picture. The answer, my dear friends, is that it's a long story. It is in fact a very long story that stretches back to my childhood when I was still in grade school. So there was this anime back when I was a kid. It was called Ether Rangers and was a show about anthropomorphic animals who fought to protect their multiverse from monsters. The 12 heroes were actually based on the 12 animals of the Chinese zodiac. I identified most with the snake character in the show. Yorori, I think his name was, and he was often the aloof and cranky genius of the whole bunch. Of course, it was mostly just a show for kids, and I suppose a lot of you out there will just scoff at me mentioning all this. But for me, at that time, it was one of the brightest and happiest moments of my life. And to that, I would like to make a shout out to my old friends, Michael Ladringan, JP Valencia, Paul Vincent Miro, Christian Hetubig, and Denjo Bonilla. My friends who introduced me to that anime in the first place. I would also like to thank Michael and JP for giving our short Ironclaw campaign a chance in Club Morocco. I'm not sure if you actually liked it, but at least we got to try it out. Hopefully next time we'll get a chance to finish the whole thing. Anyway, continuing with my story, I've always wondered how I could recreate the feeling I had when I watched that anime. It's one of the things that actually got me interested in writing. Well, to be honest, I tried drawing first, but since I couldn't draw worth squat, I pretty much stuck to writing. It wasn't anything glorious, and I never really won any prizes or awards for the way I wrote back then, but it was a start. The show stopped airing when I started going to high school, and for a while I wondered when I'd be able to see it again. Sad to say, it never really did come back. However, I had no idea that the feelings it brought me all those years ago would come back in a big way. I had already begun my career as a school teacher when I first encountered a strange role-playing game that featured various animals as playable characters. At first, I wasn't sure what I was even looking at. It was a game about animals, that was for sure, but just what kind of game was it? And this, ladies and gentlemen, was my first foray into the role-playing game known as Ironclaw, a game about anthropomorphic animals and various adventures that include magic, hand-to-hand combat, firearms, and many, many more. Ironclaw is a game created by Sanguine Games, the same company responsible for various other games with anthropomorphic animals such as Urban Jungle, the Albedo RPG, and the Usagi Yojimbo RPG. As such, it uses the same game engine called the Cardinal System, which requires a large set of dice that include 4-sided dice, 6-sided dice, 8-sided dice, 10-sided dice, and 12-sided dice. The mechanics may seem confusing at first, but once you become familiar with how it actually works, it begins to make more sense. First, one of the most basic rules in the game is the rule of 4. When you roll the dice, you do not add the results together. Instead, what matters most is how many numbers are higher than 3, that is 4 and above. Every dice that shows a number higher than 4 is considered a success. So, for instance, if your character is attempting to negotiate for the price of an item with a merchant and he makes a roll of 2 4-sided dice and 1 8-sided dice, resulting in 2, 4, and 6, your character has succeeded in their task. Second is the rule of opposed rolls. This is when your character must roll against an opponent's dice. In this instance, what counts most is the highest number that results from the individual rolls. An example of this would be combat, wherein your character is facing against an opponent. Your character rolls his melee attack dice, which include 1 6-sided dice and 2 8-sided dice that result in a 1, 5, and 6. His opponent in turn rolls his dodge dice, which are simply 2 10-sided dice, which results in 4 and 9. Your character's highest number is 6, but your opponent rolled the highest number, which is 9, meaning your opponent has managed to evade your attack. That said, had your opponent rolled something higher than 6, like a 7, then that would mean he had managed to make 2 successes instead of 1. Last, of course, is the rule of botching. Your character will have botched his roll if he had rolled nothing but 1 on all of his dice. This also applies to rolling 3 or more 6s when using black magic. The only difference being that all 1s tend to result in more mundane mishaps, like accidentally breaking or dropping your weapon, while 3 or more 6s can mean anything from getting yourself cursed to possessed. It is the Game Master, who in this game is called the Game Host, who decides on what happens when you botch a roll. Creating a character in this game can take a while, but is actually more fun than it sounds. At the very beginning, the Game Host gives each player a set of 6 dice they will use to build their character. They are 2 8-sided dice, 3 6-sided dice, and 1 4-sided dice. Each dice goes into one of each of your traits, which are body, speed, mind, will, species, and career. Body refers to your character's strength and resilience. Speed signifies your character's dexterity and agility. Mind sums up your character's intelligence and wisdom. Will is both your character's charisma and determination. Species is the type of animal your character is. Finally, career is more or less your character's class. Note also that the larger the dice you use for a trait, the better they are likely to be at it. So a character with a D8 in species and a D4 in mind would be a bestial savage, more in tune with their animal nature than on being civilized. Meanwhile, a character with a D8 in career and a D4 in will might be a competent worker, but probably has very poor social skills. The most interesting part of this game, however, is the large number of animal species you can choose to play as. There are upwards of 80 species that are available to make into player characters, from mighty elephants, cunning foxes, mysterious ravens, powerful crocodiles, venomous vipers, to stealthy spiders. They are all available as playable species. Better yet, with upcoming supplements in Book of Corals, players will be given an even wider array of animal species to play as. Next, of course, is selecting a career for your character, which determines their occupation. Much like species mentioned above, careers are as varied as they come. You can be anything from a bounty hunter, a knight, a wizard, to an accomplished criminal. The options are almost limitless in this regard. Note that, unlike most D20 systems where the idea of character alignment is standard, the same is not the case for Ironclaw. In this game, you can select for your character a motto by which he or she can live by and a personality that he or she is known for, be it grumpy, cheerful, or despondent. Next is that you will need to give your character a set of goals to accomplish, which, when fulfilled, grants the character experience points with which to improve their abilities. Then your character must select a number of skills and gifts with which to further customize their characters. When it comes to skills, you can make your character better at negotiating with others, deceiving unwary enemies, studying biochemistry and engineering, throwing a spear, or fighting with a sword. Gift in this game function much like the feats of D20 games in that it grants your characters additional abilities that serve to make them more powerful in a given situation. Gifts are what allow for wizards to use magic, or rangers to shoot so well with their bows. In fact, given enough time, a character can eventually gain so many skills and gifts that they can become almost godlike beings in their own right. The game Ironclaw itself takes place in the dawn of the Age of Reason, or the Renaissance, when gunpowder is first starting to be seen as a highly effective weapon, and sailors have become more curious about the rest of the world. It is during this age that the great empire of the Rinaldi, the Grey Foxes, have begun to decline, and the people of Calabria, the setting's European counterpart, have begun exploring and expanding to other continents. Players are placed in the role of the growing middle class, who often start as free commoners but can eventually become powerful and wealthy as that of the nobility, or perhaps even become nobility themselves. If you're into anthropomorphic animals adventuring in the Age of Sail, then this might just be the game for you. Again, this is Natural Juan, bidding you all have a good one today. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and share it, as well as subscribe to my ever-growing channel. See you guys in the next video!